Hello and welcome to MLW Con-Fusion. I'm your host Rob Cameron, bringing you all that you may or may not need to know about Major League Wrestling and its television programming. Still, no MLW programming this week, but luckily, got a new friend of the show. I'm going to sit down today and talk with the Managerial Measuring Stick, Mark Storm. We're going to talk about his return to SCW Pro after a 6-year hiatus and all the thought processes and filling in the gaps he did in between his retirement and returning now. But first, we do have some news. We get some new names coming up to the CMLL Grand Prix 2024. It was previously announced that AKIRA Kwan of Contra would be joining the tournament. That is CMLL versus the World. Two names to be had for that, coming from MLW, is the Death Fighter AKIRA and WTF's Davey Boy Smith Jr. They are both looking to take the number one spot in this Torneo Cibernetico, I believe it is, and we can catch that live on CMLL's YouTube channel, but you got to be part of the membership pack on that, so it's not free for us peons. However, that will be August 23rd at 8:30 p.m. We also got Never Say Never coming up next week. Really what I would like to hear is Never Say Never to returning to weekly programming, or at least programming every other week. Man, this one show in a month thing is kind of killing me. It is, maybe it's killing the rest of you as MLW fans too. I don't know. I'm not going to speak for the masses on this one, but I kind of miss Fusion. Anyway, Never Say Never is going to be August 10th, 10 p.m. Eastern Time on the YouTube and or beIN Sports, whichever one you happen to get your MLW programming for. It is going to be the second half of the tapings last month, Fury Road. Do we have matches? I don't know. Let me pull out my notes real quick and see what we got going on match-wise. Oh, yeah, we do have a match lineup. Main event looks to be MLW Heavyweight Champion Satoshi Kojima, a fast food breakfast sandwich, and AKIRA taking on Contra Unit, being represented by Mads Kruger, AKIRA Kwan, and Minoru Suzuki. We also have Opera Cup action. 3 Opera Cup first-round matches is Mystico battles Magnus. Alex Kane battles Mr. Thomas for Beaumaye Supremacy. Not really. They claim to be tight, but we'll find out. Maybe the Upper Cup is that final wedge between everyone. We'll also see Bad Dude Tito take on the debuting Danny Jones. Renee Michelle also makes her debut. She will be taking on former featherweight champion Delmi Exo. Davey Boy Smith Jr. will be battling AJ Francis in a battle of technically WTF. Francis is allegedly on the outs, but we basically not heard anything about why they're on the outs or whatnot. And last but not least, Jake Christ battling Brett Ryan Goslin. So be sure to check that out. We will have a review of that, of course, the week after, so you to hear my thoughts and ideas, and hopefully they're all great. So we're lacking a banger of a show here recently, so hopefully this helps pick things up. But if that, fails, we still have Summer of the Beasts coming up on August 29th. That is in New York City. Tickets still available according to online sources. It has been announced that we are having a rematch with Miyu Yamashita making her return to MLW, taking on Delmi Exo. Rematch from back, shortly after Delmi lost the championship. Yamashita came in and, defeated Delmi, kind of putting her on a little bit of a spiral there. So hopefully Delmi is looking to turn things around, get back, I guess she's still back in the win column, but, coming back to, take revenge on their loss at Summer of the Beasts. We also have Stardom's Hanako. She is debuting. It was previously announced that she was debuting for the company a couple of weeks ago, but her opponent has been revealed for Summer of the Beasts, and that is going to be Janai Kai. That's right, Hanako is battling Janai Kai for the MLW Featherweight Championship, and, once again, don't get me wrong, Hanako is a well-decorated competitor, but she hasn't done anything in MLW to show why she gets a title shot when, Del Miexo could probably get another shot because her last match ended kind of funky with, getting maced and all that sort of good stuff. Where's Zeta? I don't know. It's one of my pet peeves in wrestling when someone just debuts and gets a title shot. Like, yes, you may be world traveled, but you haven't had the competition here, and I can just make a joke about, like, you haven't faced the competition in the major leagues yet, baby. But I won't actually do that because, well, technically, I already did that. Anywho, so, and the last announced matchup, at least this morning, as of this here recording, it could change, because usually things change by the time I record and when the podcast drops, but Matthew Justice with Bill Alfonso will be battling our favorite fast food breakfast sandwich, as well, in a match that I would say I'd be thrilled to see, because I do enjoy the work of Matthew Justice. However, I get the distinct feeling that my monitor is going to go out during this match, so not gonna lie on that one. Okay, I'm technically lying because my monitor's not going out. I'm just not gonna watch it. That's fact of the matter. Anywho, so that is the news coming from Summer of the Beast so far. Hopefully Justice can kind of get back on track, but let's be realistic, people. I'm only half an idiot, and my brain box kind of tells me he's getting fed to the fast food breakfast sandwich, even upsetting my cat in the background. That's a lie. What's upsetting her is that I won't let her rub her face on the microphone while I'm using it. Anywho, so that's the news from MLW coming out of this week. Of course, stay tuned after this here ad break. We are sitting down with Mark Storm, the Managerial Measuring Stick, manager of champions, if you will. So stay tuned. First, we're going to get ourselves an energy drink, and we'll be right back. If you're like me, sometimes you need a pick-me-up to get you through the day. I drink Ray's Energy for that pickup. Ray's comes in a bunch of different flavors, and more recently Italian Ice, which is great, by the way. And it contains no sugar, so there's no crash after you drink it. And, really, best of all, if you go through me and go to wetrepsports.com, use my code CASS, you get 15% off your order. So, also, be like Cass, drink Ray's Energy. Hey everyone, we are back. As I said at the top of the show, got a special guest today on the podcast, on the con. Today, I have with me the Managerial Managing Stick, the Manager of Champions, Mark Storm. Mark, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Rob.
Oh, thank you for coming on the show. I really try to get as many of the SCW boys in here as my, we'll call it spoons, allow me to do. And it's great for you to be coming back now that you're back in the business, which is kind of how we're going to start this podcast, is talking about your return to the business. But to preface your return, have a story about the camera household that, well, leads directly into this, is SCW Pro Season Beatings 2023 be January 9th. I remember this date mostly because it was my wife's birthday. And I've said on the podcast numerous times, and plug it every now and again as well directly, but MLW Con-Fusion is a proud sponsor of SCW Pro. And I usually just throw money out, and I don't ask for anything, any perks outside of just, slap my logo on things and occasionally tag me in whatever advertising SCW does for a specific event. But for Dawn's, my wife's birthday, I really like thinking out of the box for her. And so I'm like, she's a big SCW Pro fan. Let's get her a birthday card signed by the roster. And so, I pull some strings, get it done, and lo and behold, which wasn't part of the deal, at the show itself, her card is delivered by Santa Claus, the one and only. And of course, we're older, we're skeptical, and we spend a lot of time at this event going, who's Santa Claus? Is it the real Santa Claus? Is it a worker? Is it, someone who's a semi-professional Santa Claus? And we just, we have it in the back of our head and we talk about it in between matches or whatever. But we finally get to the main event. And it's a 12 Weapons of Christmas street fight between Crotch, our QC Cup holder, and his rival, John Bonhart. Weapon, I believe it was weapon number 12, I believe, was Santa Claus, which is crazy go nuts. And we're like, yes, Bonhart, the dastardly villain in this scenario, is finally going to get his comeuppance. He's on the naughty list all the time, of course. And much to the chagrin of the Camera household, because Crotch is one of our favorites in this house, Santa Claus delivers a low blow to Crotch, eventually costing him the match. And Santa Claus in this match was revealed to be the returning Mark Storm, who hasn't been seen in like 6 years at this point. Mark, this is your big return to SCW Pro, but how could you do this to us?
Well, first off, I do want to let you know that it was not Mark Storm as Santa Claus when your wife had the card delivered to her. I could not risk anybody knowing that it was me and spoiling the big reveal and foiling my plan, so to speak. So basically what happened was we had a ringer Santa Claus take my place when doors were open and mixing and mingling with the crowd because, let's be honest, Mark Storm's very, very distinctive mannerisms and, his voice and whatever. We just couldn't risk that being spoiled for the later in the evening. So yes, it was somebody else. But I will say that your wife allowing you to take her to an SCW show for her birthday, she's a keeper, man. Hold on to her.
Oh, I'm trying.
I don't know if I was a fan but not involved in SCW, I don't know if my wife would sign off on that. I think she's looking at dinner, maybe a musical, something like that. So good for her.
Well, and this wasn't the only thing. We actually did go out for a really nice lunch beforehand, but actually, like, spoiler, like she would much rather watch wrestling live in person than she would on TV. Like if it's on TV, she's got her phone out or she's got a book, and like she'll pop up like when maybe something interesting pops up. But like if I'm like, hey, let's go, you want to go? Well, mostly to SCW Pro because it's close. But hey, do you want to go see SCW Pro? Do you want to go to Wrestling Revolver? Like, see it live? I'm like, yeah, I want to go. So, but I agree, full on keeper she is, and anyone who listens to me like knows I'm not very good. I don't know how I'm keeping her.
Real quick, like I do want to walk this back just a little bit. I have to cover my bases as well because I know my wife will probably listen to this podcast. That is not by any means insinuating that my wife is not a keeper, because she absolutely is. She's a fan of my work at SCW. She supports me, but if I was not on the card, there's probably other things she would rather be doing. Just for clarification, still want to keep her.
Well, of course, if we're going to rank our wives, of course, my wife will be number one in my eyes, and your wife will be number one in your eyes, regardless what praise we will heap upon each other.
For sure.
But back to the main point, though. That, as I said, was your big return to managing specifically in SCW Pro. You'd been away from the business for about 6 years. Like, how did the itch come back?
Well, when I left SCW, I was not in a good place professionally, personally. I felt like I was a shell of my former self. Just felt like I needed time to step away. Well, as I stepped away, I took a little time to do some other hobbies, which we may dabble into later. But I found myself a few different occasions almost wanting to pick up the phone and contact Merrick Brave and the powers that be in SCW and gauge interest in coming back. And I kept putting that away, pushing it back. So basically what it came down to was I was going to come to a show, and my two stepsons, who are now 22 and 19, they had been coming to shows for quite a long time, off and on. And they enjoyed it considerably. So I planned on making my return to a show, just kind of watching whatever. And I asked them if they wanted to go. Well, then I started thinking, I'm like, you know what? I can't not invite my daughter. And she hadn't been to a show. When I retired, she was like 5 years old, 6 years old. And so I'm like, okay, I can't not invite her. She's probably going to say no, but I'm going to ask. Well, anyway, I asked her and she accepted. And so we went to the show and she absolutely came out of her shell. 100% loved it. Screaming, hollering, trash talking, just, and I can't get her, like your wife, I can't get her to pay attention to wrestling when it's on TV. She could care less. But SCW, like I said, she just came full out. And so that became our thing. And we were coming to the majority of the show, sit in front row, practically every show. And the more I sat there and the more I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? I really, really miss it. I'd been out enjoying myself, performing, etc. But there was nothing that quite 100% filled that void. And I don't know if you remember, but last football season, Joe Flacco came out of retirement. I think it was the New York Jets, I believe. I could be mistaken. But anyway, somebody's quarterback had gone down. Joe Flacco came out of retirement and to play. And somebody asked him, they said, well, why did you come back? And he's like, I wanted my boys to see what I did rather than hear about it. Well, it was a similar thing. My daughter was so young when I had retired that she really didn't remember. And it had become our thing. And I'm like, you know what? I want her to see what dad does, to see that dad is the greatest manager in the history of SCW and that I still have it. And so I picked up the phone and made some phone calls and things got rolling from there.
You did have a brief return for the 20th anniversary of SCW Pro this in September of last year. Was that kind of like it was that kind of where things began again for you?
Yeah, because I'll be honest, there was a part of me that was like, SCW has evolved so much in 6 years. So much has changed. A lot of new fans, a lot of new talent. Is anybody going to remember me? Am I going to come back? Because I'm not going to just come back. I got to be me. I got to make it a big presentation. It's got to be some kind of surprise. There's got to be a reveal. And my biggest fear was that with this reveal, you would hear crickets or maybe one or two people going, woohoo, Storm, yay. And I didn't want that. And so anniversary was the moment that it validated to me that they do remember me. I can still get a reaction. I can still get cheers from the people who just love cheering the dastardly Mark Storm. I can still get the boos. I can still draw a reaction. So yes, it did definitely grease the wheels and help me. It was still a few months before I reached out. Well, yeah, probably 2-3 months before I reached out and inquired about coming back.
And as part of your comeback, you've taken over the career of John Bonhart, as I mentioned in our anecdote. Why John Bonhart? Like, how did that come together specifically with him?
Okay, well, basically what had happened was like I said, I wanted to be a big reveal. I wanted it to mean something, not to just have it pre-announced. Oh, here comes Mark Storm's going to be making his return. It's like I wanted it to be some kind of surprise. So when I had pitched Merrick Brave the idea of coming back, and I'd asked him if I would be welcome back. He said it would, under the right circumstances, yes. So I pitched him a storyline idea that did not involve John Bonhart, completely involved a different talent on the SCW roster who will remain nameless, just out of respect for everybody involved. But they said that he said that he really liked the idea, but when push came to shove, it just was not the direction they were looking to go with that particular talent. But they said that I was told by him and another person in SCW and creative that they were definitely interested in my return. But let's kind of keep an eye out and see what makes sense. So I'd kind of kicked around a few ideas here and there, thought about a couple people, and John had come to mind because he had stood out to me as being very, very talented wrestler, but just needed that one extra oomph to get the crowd to take him seriously. Just kind of give him a little bit more personality. John, if you're listening, I apologize. But so lo and behold, just about a week or so later, I'm driving to go support my wife in a show that she's involved with at one of the local theaters. And I get a phone call and it's a powers to be at SCW. So we're thinking, this is how we want you to come back. and this is who we want you to be with. And I said, you know what? And it was John Bonhart, and great minds think alike, basically. So yeah, we were all on the same page that John was the right fit for me. And I tell you what, it's have not looked back since. Absolutely loved every minute with him, and yeah, it's been a great fit. Absolutely great fit.
And I agree. Like he has been the guy in SCW that a lot of folks love to hate, and he's still just practically like if he isn't, he's just coming out of his rookie year, and like he is one of the top bad guys in SCW Pro, and like I full on agree. Like there was just something kind of like as you put it, holding him back, and not to blow smoke up your behind either. Like I think you've added a lot to his presentation, if nothing else, just for the ability to take some of the, I'll say, performance responsibility off of him, and he can kind of focus on what's going on in ring and improving that front while you're still outside kind of gathering the heat for him by proxy with your dastardly deeds and I mean moral support outside the ring with your manager's license.
And not to cut you off, but one of the things that was important to me too was I knew going into this that John was nowhere near SCW when I retired. He knew nothing about SCW. He knew nothing about me. And I figured it was probably when he was told that was the direction that they were going to go with him. I feel like he probably was given a little bit of backstory. But my biggest fear was, he's seen this guy that for the last year and a half or so has been sitting front row with his daughter and been, for lack of a better term, a mark, cheering and, rooting on all the good guys and booing me. And so I wanted him to know exactly what he was getting into, how he saw the direction of John Bonhart going, and who I saw Mark Storm as, and how we could properly fit. So we did sit down and had a meeting, and covered a lot of bases as far as trajectory and where exactly we were going to see this thing head. And I explained to him. I said, I've managed multiple legends in SCW. I've managed Merrick Brave, Nevin Knoxville, Stephen Youngblood, Johnny Wisdom, Tank Roberts, Marcus Crane. A lot of those people are SCW Hall of Famers. A lot of them are going to be first ballot Hall of Famers. And I knew that assigning my name with John Bonhart was going to immediately give him that, if I could, forgive my French, but that oh shit moment where people are like, if Mark Storm is putting his name on this guy is actually something. And I basically told him that. I wasn't afraid to tell him that it was going to give him some validation for sure.
Oh, of course. There's been a lot of turnover, I mean, with the fans within SCW Pro, because, life happens and you've been out of the business for quite some time. But, there's still a batch of old timers that are like me who've been coming to SCW shows for quite some time going, he's not just managing schlubs. Mark Storm is wants quality on his side. And, even pulling back the curtain a little bit, even as a performer, you don't want someone who's going to bring you down. You want someone to be able to bring, you want to be able to bring them up in the process of bringing yourself up as well. And I definitely think, again, creatively speaking, Bonhart is a good person to do that. And of course, I mean, it's working out too. He's still QC Cup holder at present time. So he's had the QC Cup close to a year by now. And I think this definitely, the addition of Mark Storm opens up creatively a lot of directions. Stories can go from there as well. That being said, that's kind of where we're at with Mark Storm. He is firmly behind John Bonhart at present moment. You touched on this a bit earlier and talking about kind of the gap in between your retirement and your return. How did you feel that time besides attending SCW Pro shows?
Well, when the curtain came down on my career in SCW at the Call Ballroom, Back, well, we're looking about 6.5, almost 7 years now since my return. But I'll be honest, as I made my exit and I stood at the top of the steps and looked down at the ring, I started tearing up, and I was thinking to myself, what's next? I'm not a bowler. I'm not a softball player, dart league. That's not my thing. You ask my wife, I absolutely hate playing cards. So the more I thought about it, so, I still like that rush of getting out in front of people and performing. And my wife, we'd actually met because she was involved in local theater. I had met her one night. I was out drowning my sorrows, going through a divorce, and uh, ran into her. She was out having a drink after one of her rehearsals for a show that she was involved in, and you know, wasn't looking at the time. Became friends. Shortly after that, started dating or whatever. But anyway, fast forward over the time that she and I have been together. I've met a lot of wonderful people through involved in local theater. Made a lot of connections, and I'm not ashamed to admit that sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know. And being as close as she and I were, and somebody who I know has got abundance of talent and knowledge when it comes to theater, I knew that I would be a fool not to tap into her abilities and her knowledge, plus a lot of the people that I had met. And so it just seemed like a natural transition that I would segue into theater. So I started off with actually doing some murder mystery theater, which is a lot of improvisational. You do follow a story, though, same thing. Went into a play. Since then I've done 3 musicals, and so that was a lot of what I did during my hiatus was local theater.
Oh, so like you get to kind of stay quasi in the game, if you will. Um, what shows did you get to take part in?
Uh, well, the first show was a locally written play called The Losers Bracket, which was a comedy down at Black Box Theater. That was a natural first step for me because the character was kind of goofy, kind of sarcastic, and kind of was a lot like me personality wise, so it wasn't very far of a reach. So from there, I performed. I was in Holiday Inn, played ironically an agent slash manager in that show. Not nearly as mean as Mark Storm. It was in an ensemble for a show, but the one that I would probably say that I hang my hat on the most was um, about a year and a half ago. I performed as Bill Sykes in local presentation of Oliver. So, if those of you who don't know, Bill Sykes is the main baddie. We're talking murderer, abusive to children, just a nasty dude. And that's the role that I take the most pride in. And yeah.
Go with the Bill Sykes character. Like how did you get yourself into that space? Because as you put it, he's a big nasty dude, and traditionally speaking, in most literature and adaptations of the play. And this is not meant by any slight by any stretch of the imagination, but like physically, you are not a physically imposing guy.
Right. I am by no means physically imposing. I'm at about average height, like 5'9", not big build. So the direction I chose to go with the character was just kind of make him more unpredictable, like more like a pit bull, where he's gonna latch on to you. He's gonna be aggressive. He's not necessarily going to overpower you, even though pit bulls are, they do have powerful jaws and whatever, but just more of that real tenacious and nasty, and um, carried around a cudgel. Obviously, the cudgel that is a big wooden stick, like a dowel. Think like a police officer's billy club. Using that for physical intimidation, and yeah, there was a lot of tools that I used just to kind of overcome my lack of physical stature.
Well, that obviously works, and now I'm actually kind of sad I missed it, but can't go back in time. Um, But kind of like moving on with that, you said that's kind of the role you hang your hat on. Like, what made him so special to you?
Um, just I mean, for one, he was character created by Charles Dickens. Oliver is a famous Charles Dickens novel. Um, Very accomplished, one of the world's most famous authors, and just a lot of layers. He was mean and nasty, but you kind of realize as you watch the character and found out some of his backstory as far as the reason why he was kind of mean and nasty. And there were layers. Kind of like with an onion. He had a girlfriend named Nancy, which you could tell that he loved her in his own special way, but he was also mean, nasty, and dare I say, physically abusive. But this were the mean streets of London in the 1800s, and you had to do what you had to do to survive. And so there was a lot of gray area that which I feel like is the same thing with a lot of villains in storytelling. To be honest with you, is just about every villain in storytelling, and not just in storytelling, in real life, one way or another, they feel like what they're doing is valid. They don't feel like they're necessarily doing something wrong. There's a reason behind it, and that's one of the things that I saw in the character, and I felt like, dramatically speaking, that was the biggest step for me, the biggest reach, and the thing that was furthest away from who I was as a person. So, and I really wanted that challenge.
I agree, like, on terms of how, how a good villain is written. Like, really what separates the villain from a hero. I mean, obviously they think they're justifying their actions, but really, like, even when there's the I don't know, we'll put it as, the goal is noble. How they choose to achieve said goal is varying shades of just merely bad to outright horrifying. We can try to use like Thanos for an example in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where I mean his ultimate goal is just to make sure that you know everybody has the resources they need, so no one's going for want in terms of food, shelter, etc. However, snapping away half of all life is probably not the way to go about it. I think we all agree on that. And so, yeah, but I full on agree. Like that helps kind of give you something to latch onto in a character, regardless of its alignment. Kind of continue on with playing Sykes or any other character though. What was it like for you to go from pro wrestling is pretty impromptu, is pretty ad libbed, improvised. How did that go? How did you adjust from going to this level of improvisation for most of your career into what is a bit more structured in terms of traditional stage acting?
Definitely very challenging. Biggest one of all is the fact that you are in theater, you're playing a character, at least on my front. I mean, there's exceptions like say Lin Manuel Miranda, people like that. But it's like I was performing as a character that was written by somebody else, and they had a particular vision. I had to kind of try and find that vision, expand on it. Whereas Mark Storm was my own creation from the get go, as far as who I saw Mark Storm, who he was, how he's evolved, and so it was. The other characters were more black and white. I mean, Bill Sykes isn't going to come out and do some campy, sarcastic line, or open up the crowd to have a laugh at his expense, which Mark Storm will occasionally do because I know people enjoy that. But yeah, just working within those fine lines and trying to figure out who they want me to be rather than who I feel I am as a character. Like I said, I created as myself. I apologize. I kind of turned around, went full circle on that. But there's that. One of the things I found is, as we all know, professional wrestling, 99.9% of the time, Iowa City show recently was one exception, but you're performing in the round. When you have your back to one person, you're facing somebody else. In theater, that's called, closing yourself off to the audience. You don't turn your back on the audience. You know, and so that was one of the biggest criticisms I got early on in auditions and notes that I was giving when I was first starting to perform, is you keep turning your back on the audience. It's like, that was one of the biggest habits to break. So yeah, those were probably two of the biggest challenges, plus learning pages upon pages of script. Typically when I would go out, cut a promo, speak as Mark Storm, I had cliff notes in my head. I had bullet points, ideas that I wanted to work with, where I was going to go. And then I just kind of flew by the seat of my pants. Learning the script was an entirely different kind of animal.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Same way for a lot of the stuff I do for this here podcast, except it's probably painfully obvious that I don't have a real script in front of me, and I'm just winging things off the bullet points. So we did cover, what challenges you had moving into, we'll call it traditional acting. Like, what did you adapt to the easiest then, just to keep it positive?
Well, one of the things I always like to tell people is, so with my normal 9-to-5 job, it's not technically 9 to 5, but you know what I mean. Sometimes we're in meetings, you go around and there may be somebody appearing in the meeting you never met before, whatever, somebody coming speaking, an instructor or whatever. So they typically will go around the room and, okay, introduce yourself, give your first name, last name, how many years you've been here, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not kidding. Every time that they would do that, I would be a nervous wreck until it came to me. So put me in front of a couple hundred people, close to 1,000 people, whatever, as a character, as Mark Storm, Bill Sykes, whoever. I will shine, and I may have a little bit of nerves, but I will be good. Put me up there as myself, without that character, and having fall back on who I actually am, that's a struggle for me. So being able to go out there and escape reality in theater, that was easy, because I had almost 15 years of experience in SCW doing that. So
I know SCW Pro is taking up a bit of your free time now, but is there any plans of going back into theater?
Not currently. So when I first made the decision that I was going to go back and put the feelers out, I had not had a conversation with my wife about this, because I did not know how it was going to be received. So after I had received the feedback that yes, we would be interested in having you come back under the right circumstances, I had the conversation with her. It was a big change for our family as far as getting back into the wrestling schedule and some of the commitments, things like that. And so she was a little hesitant at first. And one of the first things she said to me, she's like, "You're not coming back to theater, are you?" I said, "No, I will." I said, "I don't know how long this return is going to last, but performing in theater and performing in wrestling, it's two totally different animals. They're both rushes, but different. And as far as the type of people you interact with, and a lot of the, not going to bore you with all the details, but there's some differences for sure. And so I'm still hungry for that return with the right role and whatever. But right now I'm having absolutely the time of my life during my time back in SCW, working with John, touching a new generation of fans, getting reacquainted with some of the old ones. So I don't see anything on the immediate horizon as far as your return, but never say never.
A role will always be waiting indirectly. Like there's at least in the Quad City area, there's at least 3 or 4 different theater troupes going on at any given time, it seems like. But since you brought it up, and I know that I think I know the answer to it because of where your career's at now, but the stage acting or professional wrestling, like which gave you the bigger rush in terms of the crowd and performing?
I would say absolutely, absolutely wrestling for sure. Um, because typically in theater you don't normally get a lot of boos. I mean, you will get a reaction, but most theater goers are kind enough to wait and wait till the end of the scene before they really react, before they give any kind of applause, before they give any kind of boo. So yeah, that rush of the entrance music, knowing that when I'm doing something that's just absolutely has got the, has drawn the heat and gotten people pissed off at me, it is absolutely fantastic. I will segue back just a little bit. Bear with me, but a story from Oliver. So my character Bill Sykes does not appear for the majority for barely at all in the first act. So second act, there's a big scene. Nancy, his girlfriend's doing this dance in this pub and singing a song, Papa. Everybody's having a good time. Glasses are clinking. Everybody's just having an absolute ball. And it's like this big party. Well, then all of a sudden you hear this boom, boom, boom. And then you hear Bill Sykes. And I get to make my grand entrance singing a song. I sing my song. Spotlight's on me. Everybody in the pub, everybody in the theater, everybody's watching me, 100% focused on, okay, here comes this mean nasty dude. And my wife was actually part of the production staff for this show. And when she first broke the news to me, she's like, yeah, you get your own entrance with a spotlight and your music and everything else, and everybody is focused on you. And I was like, ooh boy. And she's like, you love it, you know it. It's like, absolutely. That's took me back. That was the first time that it really took me back to the feeling that I had in professional wrestling, as far as, when the music hits now and John and I come out, I feel all the eyes on us. Everybody's waiting to see, what we're going to do. They want to boo us. They want to, they want to try and smack our hands, whatever they want to do to get in our faces. So yeah, it definitely brought me back to that. And so, yeah, the rush of the entrance music and having the crowd eat out of the palm of your hands, there's nothing like it.
No, I knew the answer when I asked it, but just on the offshoot that I was wrong. But I totally get that. And professional wrestling is, worlds apart from most traditional forms of entertainment, because you get that feedback in the moment as well. As you put it, most of the time the applause waits for the end of the scene, or whatever's going on with it. There's really nothing to go by, like, in terms of how you think you are doing for a role. Like, you can say in your head, like, yeah, I nailed it, I did what I was supposed to do, but did the crowd feel it? Did the crowd, what did the crowd think of it? And you really don't get to know that until the very end. Like, maybe if you're lucky, you can get like a shocked applause, light applause, or just the collective gasp. But as a whole, like, things aren't, that energy isn't just swirling about in the moment, letting you know, like, what is going on, like, how much people love to hate you in any given moment.
Yeah, there was like one or two occasions in that show where I did slap Nancy, and you could hear like the crowd just go, and that's probably the closest that that I got in my time in theater, as far as getting that instantaneous reaction where people are like, "Oh my god, he just did that." So yeah,
Oh,
but
well,
yeah,
that's
that
like the
is
low.
like nothing else.
I guess that's the lowest of the low right there. Slapping the spouse, even in theater, even when you're the nastiest villain. Um, but joking aside on that, yeah, I definitely agree, and it's, a whole other feeling, kind of getting that attention and approval, or, well, disapproval in the moment. I'm going to ask, it's going to be quasi random, but you put a kind of an earworm kind of in my brain, or brainworm, in talking about kind of the struggle from going to stage acting, in terms of like the prep and performing of it. But you referenced professional wrestling traditionally being in the round, and the exception was at, Iowa City, the block party, but they had to move. For those of you know where Iowa City has a big block party at a big outdoor festival kind of thing, like tens of thousands of people are there. The weather was inclement, so SCW Pro had to go into the local theater. So like you actually got like real theater seats, and got to see wrestling upon the stage. So it's slightly different than the traditional route. But just more out of morbid curiosity, what was the oddest venue you ever had to perform in, whether it's on the stage or in the squared circle?
Um, I would say that definitely the experience at the England Theater in Iowa City was definitely up there as far as just overall uh, experience. The fact that it's like, oh, well, I kind of am making my return to theater, and just the entire way that it was set up. It did kind of give me a flashback to the early days of SCW when we performed in QC. What was it? I want to say it was called QC Live or something like that. I could be misspeaking. I could be getting it mixed up with one of the local shows currently. But it was a club down now where the farmers market is, and the way we used to set up down there is we would set up, and the only way to set the ring up was up against one of the windows. So there was two sides of it that were closed off, and then there was people like on two and a half sides of it. So that was probably the closest to that feeling as far as being back on that, where it's like, oh, you again, you had to, in theater terms, cheat out and work that side of the ring more so, just like we did for the Iowa City show. Um, I would say, not really strange, but kind of like a wow moment. Um, so SCW used to perform back at Don's Pub in Donahue, Iowa. I think you go back far enough, you remember that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ironically, I found Don's Pub because my ex-wife was Don's niece, and that is where we held our wedding reception. And so we were in a pinch, and we had a venue back out on us, and we were like, okay, where can we hold a show? So I reached out to Don, and we made things meet or whatever. Just a little brief backstory on that, and that became our home for quite a while. But the idea that it's like, okay, I walked in here with my wife, and everybody absolutely loved me and was there for my moment. And here's at the time, I thought was one of the happiest days of my life. To practically every memory I have at Don's Pub going forward was me being booed and called an a-hole and just being this dastardly jerk, and going from this this big beautiful ceremony and reception to the chaos and the pageantry that is professional wrestling. So I know I didn't completely answer your question, but venue wise, as far as like strangest, I would say just because of how it all played out, that's what made it strange for me.
No, and honestly, that makes it even better because there's that personal connection to it. One of the things I love kind of about independent wrestling is just that it can be anywhere, and so you do get these stories such as yours. Is like we had a our home for a bit was where I had my wedding reception, or we have this taking place impromptu in a theater because you couldn't go out, you couldn't have the event outside because it was going to storm, and they've got you an alternative place to do it. We get the great stories of all the bars and pubs or all that sort of thing, and it's always just kind of interesting to hear like some of the more memorable venues that people get to perform in. Like I personally, like I don't know if you've ever been down south enough to see it. Not that it's terribly south, still central Illinois, but like the Avanti's Dome in Pekin, just a giant inflatable dome, and it's a soccer field. Like so, you're out there sitting on bleachers and AstroTurf, and it's so like it's such a like interesting like feeling, just feeling like the artificial air just swirl around you because it's just a giant inflatable dome. And then it gets even stranger when Tracy Smothers is up there saying he's going to do a fly his helicopter and land it on the top of it. I'm like, no, Tracy, that will kill us all. But that's a brief aside. And whenever I can fit a Tracy Smothers story in there, I try to. We've covered your theater career. We've covered your return to SCW Pro. And talked about you pairing up with John Bonhart. I won't make you pull back the curtain to see if there's anybody else you got your eye on, but so we'll kind of like round things down with a couple of other just, I don't know, we'll call it standard podcasty kind of questions. But you have had quite the extensive career as a professional wrestling manager. Who was your favorite person to manage?
Well,
barring John Bonhart, of course, because obviously he's your favorite because he's leading you to gold right now.
Well, I will honestly say that John is probably up there because there's a number of people that I have worked with in the past where, sometimes it takes a little while to build that chemistry, to know what the other person is going to do, how to react accordingly, how you're going to make the puzzle pieces fit. And I'm not going to lie to you. It happened almost immediately with John from night one. It's like there was not that just awkwardness in that, okay, he was quick to get me involved. Just everything. It's like we were on the same page almost immediately. And I mean, that's honestly the gospel. That's the truth. That's not something I'm saying to inflate any egos or anything like that, or, bullshit anybody. But yeah, so John was definitely up there as far as just overall managerial experience, as far as who I've enjoyed. Marcus Crane, I rest his soul. I loved managing Marcus Crane just because the character was so out there. You just never knew exactly what he was going to do. And it created a lot of candid moments where I legitimately would be laughing, or what you got from me was a legitimate response because I did not see what he was going to do, what was coming. So that was fun. Merrick Brave, I know he doesn't listen to podcasts, so I'm not doing this to inflate his ego, but he's got a wealth of wrestling knowledge. So when I got to work with him, I actually learned a lot of things that I've used going forward, just as far as how to interact with the crowd, how to work the camera, just different things. And so, yeah, I mean, there's probably 3 different people there. That's not to take away from anybody else that I worked with, because I had a lot of fun with pretty much everybody that I had. But those 3, obviously, for just different reasons, which I gave. So,
well, of course, and like we did put over, like you can really tell how well you and John fit together, and it is very impressive that you guys have gelled so quickly. I mean, granted, like we're talking to this nearly a year of you guys being together, but even if we would have done this interview 6 months ago, like it was, I would still say it was pretty well apparent how you guys gelled together. And I agree with Merrick. As much as I've talked to specifically, especially the SCW Pro guys, most of the guys that have trained at the Black and the Brave Wrestling Academy, which Merrick is a head trainer out there, like they point out that like he's got a full world of knowledge in his head, and that there's a lot of stuff that it's kind of hard to kind of like stump him if they're looking for advice. And he's pretty darn quick to kind of like jump in if one of the other instructors have just kind of like hit a roadblock in terms of like, okay, something's going on here, but we're not sure what it is, can't put our finger on it. And then Marcus Crane, well, like if those of you have watched Marcus Crane's work, like I don't know what else you can say. Like you can really add to it. I will put over the Card Subject to Change podcast because they did a whole retrospective on him with his addition to the GCW Hardcore Hall of Fame. That was very well done, and there'll be a rare occasion where I don't make some sort of joke about Card Subject to Change implying some sort of rivalry that doesn't actually exist. But be sure you go dig that up on their YouTube as well. But yeah, Marcus, yeah, I feel like he would be its own like batch of challenges just because of how how he was in general, compared to like some other competitors in the ring. But sorry, I got on my own little like memory based, carousel of monologuing on there as well. But as I said, we're gonna get the wind this out a little bit more. You've said that you're not quite, you're gonna ride this next wave out. Like, so what do you see coming next in the future for Mark Storm? Whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 5, 10.
Well, I'll tell you what, I am just back in June, I celebrated my 51st birthday. So I will honestly tell you that I don't see me having another 10 years in me, which would put me at 61 and knocking on the door of being able to retire and draw Social Security. I don't think anybody wants to see that. As far as 2 or 3, I'm not sure. As long as it's feeling good, as long as it's feeling right, and I feel like I'm bringing my A game and getting the reaction that I need and having fun with it, I can't honestly say how long I'm going to be, how long I'm going to be around. It could be a couple of years. It could be 3 years. It could be a year from now. I feel like, you know what, I've got my fix and it's time to ride off into the sunset. But right now there is currently no exit strategy in mind.
All right, so we'll end you on this one. Where can we find you on the interwebs? How can we keep up to date on the latest in Mark Storm?
Well, Facebook, I kind of try to keep my Facebook somewhat private, although I have had some fans have found me. Typically, I try to limit that only to people that I've had some interactions, some personal interactions with, because I share a lot of pictures of my family and personal details, things like that. So I don't necessarily want that out there for everybody to see. But as far as X, fuck it, Twitter, I'm not going to call it X. That's just stupid. You can find on the Mark Storm. That is capital T, lowercase HE, capital M, lowercase ARK, capital S, and you know what? I don't have to spell out the rest for you. But the Mark Storm.
All right, Mark Storm on Twitter. He is with SCW Pro like nearly every month, and if there's more than one show a month, usually on that show too. I think the next show is hot. Is that, I think, August 10th?
Yes, August 10th. Special start time of 6 p.m. instead of the normal 7 p.m. start time. So we'll see how that goes over. So hopefully it means big things.
And that is at the Bluegrass Community Center in Bluegrass, Iowa, for those of us that are close enough to go. And if you're close enough to go or happen to be in that nebulous area of Eastern Iowa, Western Illinois, totally show up. SCW Pro is some of the best pro wrestling, if not the best pro wrestling in
I will say real quick, like, if you are going to show up, make sure you get there early, because the diehards do get there early.
Oh, yeah.
With a 6 o'clock start time, doors you're supposed to open at 5:30. But if it's too hot, they may make the call to open them a little bit earlier. So, and those seats fill up pretty quick. So make sure you get there early and stake your spot in line.
But yeah, as I said, best kept secret in the Midwest. I'll be there. Come say hi to me. Come say hi to Mike, to the wife. Visit Mark at the merch table and get his shirts. And I would say they're 8x10s, but it's not an 8x10. It's like 8x11 or so.
It's like an 8x13 to be completely
13.
honest.
There we
The
go.
picture was, and if I trimmed it out, I would have lost some of the cool details. So you know what, I chose to go by and go with the 8x13. But it's a great photo. So, and so are the shirts. So come see me.
But thank you, Mark, for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Look forward to talking to you again sometime.
MLW Con-Fusion is a weekly podcast that's written and performed by Rob Kammer and is hosted by Spotify for podcasters. MLW Con-Fusion is part of the Urban Wrestling Network, and you can check them out on the Underground Rundown on YouTube at Urban Wrestling NW. Background music for this section is Ruined My Day, performed by Alan Schroeder. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to support, please like, subscribe, and tell your friends, family, and enemies. Leaving a review is also helpful, as word-of-mouth advertisement is very important for small podcasts. My social media links can be found in the descriptor, but the Twitter and Instagram are at the Nova of Cass, that is TheNovaofCass, and Facebook is at MLW Con-Fusion, all one word. If you'd like to support monetarily and help upgrade my equipment, and etc., please check out the tip jar at ko-fi.com/Casanova, or if you prefer some more bang for your buck, go to patreon.com/Casanova, that is CASSONOVA, whereas for as little as $2, backers get access to the podcast early and without those pesky ads, plus other exclusive content. So join the crew that is headed up by Keith Wynn, Alan Schroeder, The False Prophet, Alexander McCarthy, and Left Tendo, and check it out. You can also find t-shirts, coffee mugs, and other merch at the Con-Fusion podcast store on Teespring. Links will be below. For business inquiries such as ads and sponsorships, please email at rzkamer, that is Kamer, at comcast.net. Thank you for listening.